Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Live Series. Joe San Diego here, along with Isha Azim from Racing. With Isha, definitely want to give a big thank you to all of our Patreon investors. Colin, the show, Mark, Robin, David, and our newest one, Matthew. Thank you so much for investing in the Grid Network each and every month. You too can invest in the Grid Network, help us pay the bills, get to the track more frequently, especially in 2024. Link in the video description. Of course, you want to buy a cup of coffee, you could do that as well. Or YouTube Super Chat. If you're not watching us live, you'll see the YouTube thanks. Definitely goes a long way in helping us stay on the air. And if you want to buy a cup of coffee or a Super Chat for a particular member of the Grid Network team, you could do so. Just be sure to mention which member of the Grid Network team that cup of coffee or Super Chat is going for. Easiest way, subscribe, hit the bell icon. Great way to support us. I see you've got a comment in the chat room. A day in the life. My kids are away for the weekend, so I can finally watch the show live. Glad you're watching us live. And definitely thank you for always tuning in. Isha, we got a busy weekend. We got Formula One, the Bathurst 1000, but we'll first start off with NASCAR, the ROVAL. That's going to be something else tomorrow.
Yeah, Joe, let's start off with NASCAR. So, we've got the Charlotte ROVAL is set to end the playoff run for four more drivers. Blaney and Byron are safe and probably focusing more on Las Vegas. Now, Denny Hamlin is safe at 50 points above the cut line unless he crashes out first in stage 1. Now, Christopher Bell is 22 points above the cut line, which means nobody can overtake him with stage points, but he only has a 2-point buffer if someone sweeps the stage. So, Joe, considering where Bell was last year, can he better focus on his race and not be concerned about the nine drivers that are behind him?
For Christopher Bell, I think one of the big things he's looking at this year with the race, since he's not on the cut line, like last year below it, as above, he could go out there and focus on stage one. If he has a great qualifying effort and is towards the front for the start of the race, go out there, try to get the stage win, because that's going to put him over 30 points entering the second stage. At that point, as long as he has a decent second stage, score some points, but even if he enters with a 32-point buffer over the cut line into that final stage, he's in really good shape where I feel he'll be safe to just take it easy, make sure he just gets a good solid finish, not push it. He'll be advancing to the next round. The Roval race, one of the big things we know there's going to be drivers who are going to have bad luck. They're going to go off. There's going to be cautions. Run a clean race. You don't have to stress out about what the other drivers are doing. For Christopher Bell, I think this is going to be a great opportunity for him and that team. Get a win, first one in the playoffs this year, and then just try to focus on the next round because one more win after this weekend, you're in the championship four.
Definitely, Joe. And looking at three more drivers who are 15 points or more above the cut line, we have Buscher, Truex, and Larson. However, we saw Kyle Larson go from safely in to out of the playoffs last year, and Brad Keselowski is only 2 points above the cut line. Reddick, Wallace, and Chastain and Bush are still below the cut line. So, for you, what's the most stressful situation? Above the cut line but not safe from elimination, or below the cut line and in a must win situation?
When it comes to being below the cut line, that's always a stressful situation, no matter what happens. You gotta race your hardest, and then depend on what the other drivers do. You're in a tough situation where you have to win. That's the only way you're sure to get into the next round. But even when you're looking at Kyle Larson, we saw what happened to him at this race. He looked comfortable to go into the next round, has bad luck, and is eliminated. So he cannot just focus on what his race is doing when he's out on the track. He could easily get caught up in somebody else's trouble. A driver such as Brad Keselowski, Tyler Reddick, they could both be towards the front. And depending on what happens with him, if he doesn't score any stage points and they do, that flips the table. I mean, think of it this way. If Tyler Reddick goes out there, wins both stages, the first two stages, he's going to be ahead of Kyle Larson. So Kyle Larson is in a tricky spot. He has to be really focused on getting a good race overall. It's going to be stressful no matter what situation you're in. With the Roval and this race, I would say you almost feel a little bit more. You could do more and not worry about what the others are doing if you're Kyle Busch at the very bottom, because the worst you could be is last. You're already last. Just go out there, try to get the win, and see what happens.
That's right, Joe. And I believe we've got a question in the chat room as well. So a day in the life asks, what do you think Byron and Elliot will do at the Roval?
Byron and Elliott, I think at the Roval, their big thing for William Byron, just go out there, log laps. One of the great things we know, the 2024 schedule came out. So this race will be back next year in the same role as a cutoff race for this round. He could use this as a test session, try to get as much data, treat this like a must win situation, because at the end of the day, he'll be back here next year, whether they're advanced into the next round because they got to win, or worst case scenario, they're in a must win situation. He could really just go out there, collect the data, consider the teams in a good spot for this race next year. Now, of course, things could change between now and next year with the car. So, big thing is if there's a lot of changes, especially we know there's talks about improving the product for the road courses, the short tracks. It's going to be one of those things where at the end, that's his big thing. For Chase Elliott, he's in the owner's championship, not the drivers, but the owner's championship playoff. I think he wants to go out there, get a good solid finish. If he get a win, that's great for him, the team. The big thing though, just stay out of trouble. But with those Hendrick Motorsports, we know they're going to be fast. It's going to be just a matter of staying up front and avoiding the trouble.
Definitely, Joe. And now, if we take a look at Denny Hamlin, while himself, the driver, is feeling good, his 2311 drivers both face elimination. So, do you think this could be a distraction to Denny? And if both do get in the round of 8, could the distraction only increase?
It could, because at the end, assuming they both somehow get through, whether it's Tyler Reddick getting a win, Bubba Wallace scoring just enough points to squeak in, they're going to both be below the cut line when they start the round of 8. And then you only have 3 races to go. So you know for sure one driver will get in by points. Denny Hamlin will love to be that driver to secure a spot regardless of points. He wants to go out there and win, because if Truex has a great run and stays ahead of him in the points, he's in trouble. So that big thing I think is going to happen is when it comes to Denny Hamlin and his team, he wants to see them advance more than anything. As a team owner, he cares about the sponsors for that team, the business. He wants to see them advance, but he has to really step it up and get to the point where in the next round, if he has his 2311 teammates in there, focus on your race. Don't get caught up on what they're doing. Ideal situation would be 2311 wins the first 2 races in the next round, then Denny Hamlin gets Martinsville. But he cannot get caught up on, all right, my 2 drivers are entering Martinsville below the cut line. What are they doing? What am I doing? That's where you get into trouble, Denny Hamlin. You don't want to do that. Everyone is convinced this is his best year. He's looking very great. This is just one of those deals where I think he really has to focus on himself. The team don't get distracted by what 2311 is doing.
That's right, Joe. And Denny Hamlin's got to focus on himself, as you said. And now, if we focus on the Roval, so the NASCAR Cup Series will return to the Roval next year, and some people suggested that it would be gone. Of course, NASCAR fans are split on the Roval. So, Joe, should the Roval be on the season long term, or was it just meant to be a fix for when the mile-and-a-half ovals were less than ideal?
It was an idea for, okay, the mile and a half ovals are not making the best racing product out there. Charlotte, they didn't want to lose 2 race dates, so they got creative. Let's turn the second race date into a road course race. It has been hugely popular. Overall, fans look forward to this race. We know there's always discussion about why don't we replace the road with a natural road course? Well, once again, it goes back to Charlotte Motor Speedways does not want to lose one of their race dates, and this is the home racetrack for most NASCAR teams. This is something where we know a lot of drivers, a lot of teams are talking about after the race, before the race, they could go to their regular homes rather than sleep at the hotel, sleep at the big fancy motor coach. It's such a good spot for the team. When it comes to the position of the track, I think is where the question will be, do we want to keep it as just a playoff cutoff race? Because at the end of the day, this has always been in the playoffs, not in the regular part of the season. I feel overall this track has worked better compared to Bristol Dirt, where we're giving up on Bristol Dirt for now. We don't know if there's going to be another dirt race popping up. But at the end of the day, we know they put in a lot of money to build this track. The fans really like it. This is becoming something where I think a lot of the drivers, they know it's such a challenge. They embrace that challenge always. They will love to be tested as a race car driver. You have a scenario where I think you cannot just say, okay, the mile and a halfs are good. We're not coming back to the Roval again. I think the Roval is going to be here to stay for a while. I think it's going to continue its role in the playoffs. I'll be shocked if the 2025 season, if the Roval's not there. I know there's some particular drivers, including one that has a podcast that said the Roval's gone. That got a lot of folks all sparked up where they were happy to hear it was going to be gone or disappointed to hear that was going to be gone, but it stayed there. And I think at the end of the day, the Roval, it's going to be just something where it's a part of a NASCAR staple. You're going to have one hybrid road course where it's part super speedway, speedway, part road course. And one of the big things compared to Sonoma, Watkins Glen, if you're in the upper rows in the grandstand, you got a great view of most of the track. Where in Sonoma, you see 3 or 4 corners and then it's the video board. So I think this is a win for the industry. It makes the track diverse when it comes to the NASCAR season. I think the role is going to be staying for quite some time.
Yes, Joe, and we know that the Roval, even if it stays for quite some time, is going to be the center of much debate for NASCAR fans. But now, if we take a look at, the weekend, we have one change that's been made. So stage cautions are back after they were removed for the road courses. And NASCAR said that it was to make it consistent with the other playoff races. This week, the discussion has been, will teams pit before the stage break for positions gained or go for the points? So, Joe, what is your take on how the racing will play out?
I think the race is going to play out like past years at the Roval, where you're going to see the drivers that might be outside the top 10, even if they're, say, ninth place, eighth place, or lower, where you're only going to get 3, 2, maybe 1 stage point. Go in, make the pit stop, get that track position to win the race. The big thing too is going to be depending on who is the drivers looking at that. If you're looking at a Bubba Wallace, if he's not going to be in contention for stage points, it makes sense. Go make your pit stop. Caution comes out when the other comes in. You collect the points position. The starting positions, and then hopefully gain playoff points towards the end of the stage. One big change that occurred, the restart zone. We're no longer bypassing that final chicane. Now the final chicane, that's part of the restart zone. And after they go through that restart zone, the cars could change lanes. The field's going to be much more spread out. You're no longer going to have a big pack of 20, 30 cars all going to that first corner. So I think it's going to be very important to make those pit stops before the end of the stages, pick up those positions, and stay out front. If you can stay out front, make it hard to get around, you're going to collect stage points and that elusive playoff point if you win the stage. But if you're not going to be doing that, you better have a fast car, because at the end, the restarts, this is really going to change the nature of the race each. I feel in the past, you could always anticipate somebody's going to screw up in the restart and it's going to collect 2 or 3 cars. Now, they're all coming out of that chicane. They're going to be more spread out. You don't have that assurance. You have to be looking more at pitting before the stage breaks, getting off pit road quickly, and getting those positions. So in the restart, if you can stay up front, especially with the field more spread out, you're in a really good position to go out there and have a good race. It's just a matter of executing, as we talked about each and every week.
That's right, Joe, and it's definitely going to be interesting to see what the drivers and the teams decide to do. And before we continue on to pick a winner for NASCAR, I believe we've got a comment in the chat room. So Adam says, "I'm picking a Hendrick driver to win at the Roval, and happy Bathurst Day. Can't wait to see who can conquer Mount Panorama." Yeah, it's definitely going to be exciting to see all of this. And Joe, now who's your pick a winner for NASCAR?
Oh man, this is something where all the talk about this is what drivers need to do, and then time to pick who we think is going to win the race. At the end, I'm looking at Tyler Reddick. I think overall, he has a really good car, really good team to get it done. But I think I'm going to go with my gut instinct. I'm going to go with Christopher Bell. He won here last year. He has a fast pit crew. I think they have the great strategy to where he could go out there and get the win.
Joe, you took my pick too. I was gonna say Christopher Bell as well. And now let's head over to the Formula One sprint weekend and let's bring Josh in for this as well.
That's right. We'll bring Josh in. I know Josh is very busy doing double duty. As you can see, he's doing some British Touring Car Championship commentary right now. So we'll definitely be keeping in touch with Josh as we discuss Formula One and a developing situation where we know one of the big things that has been developing since yesterday, the tire situation. And this is something where it's getting a little bit crazy, a little bit scary because one of the big things we saw back in 2005, a tire situation in Indianapolis Motor Speedway before the United States Grand Prix, and you only had 6 cars start. Now, what's causing a lot of this mayhem? Pirelli, they saw some alarming tire degradation, which they believe was from the curbs. The new pyramid curbs that were installed this year at the track might be the issue. That's what everyone's believing, especially turn 12 and 13. So the track was adjusted with new track limits, especially turn 12 and 13, where it's about 80 centimeters closer into the track. Before the sprint shootout, we had a 10-minute track familiarization session with the new track. And the sprint race today, it is 19 laps, which is very key because at the end, they hope they could get through the sprint race, no tire issues. But worst case scenario, if we have issues for the Grand Prix, we might be looking at all teams stopping after 20 laps on the tires, essentially a 3-stop race for everybody. Isha, Josh, many compare the situation, as I mentioned, to 2005 United States Grand Prix. I remember that race that destroyed Formula One's reputation in the United States. How concerning is it that we might have a sprint race pushing the tire limits today?
Joe, I think that it is going to be slightly concerning, but I think that the majority of that depends on the familiarization session that's going to happen before the sprint race, because we know that the track at Qatar is very difficult on the tires because of the curbs as well as the weather there as well, which we know is very hot and humid. So that all ends up causing problems for the tires and it increases the tire degradation. Um, but I think that overall, the familiarization session is going to be very important for the drivers just to get a feel of, the track and how exactly they want to continue in the sprint race. But overall, I think that things could get pretty complicated with it.
Yeah, already in the qualifying session we've had this morning as well, the drivers have been going on and off the track. There's about 9 of them all waiting for penalties to possibly be given for going off the track, and some of them also for not meeting the delta time of a 1 minute 46 out there on the track. I had to write down a long list, handwritten, about what's changed. The track has been resurfaced, curbs 3 to 5 centimeters higher off the track edge. And I wrote that on Thursday because that was the thing going into yesterday, was that the curbs being so different. If you run off the track here, you're going to have a higher chance of destroying the floor of the car. Now it turns out it's actually the tyres that are having more issues out there. The paddock and grandstand rebuilt in 7 months, not really causing any issues. Everything looks fantastic there. But the turn 12 to 13 exit, as you mentioned, now 80 centimetres closer to the inside of turn 14, just to try and stop the punctures. Pirelli are going to use, as you said, Joe, the sprint race in order to analyse the tyres once more. But it's predominantly the left tyres, both front and rear, where these cuts are happening. Because when you go through this triple turn 12, 13, 14, it's a triple right. So the tyre underneath is being pulled towards the apex of the corner, which means it's almost like you get a balloon and squish the air to one side. The weakest part is actually towards where the less air is, because it's more flat rubber. So as it pulls away, the tyre carcass and the air is escaping, and small cuts are going through from the pyramid curves. So it's quite dangerous what's been happening. So I'll keep an eye on the touring car quality. I'll have to go back in a minute. But they're keeping an eye on it and they're trying to change it. But it's not just turn 12 and 13 that's causing the issues. We're seeing it at turn 5 and 6. We're seeing it at turn 10. And we're seeing it also at the last corner exit at turn 16 onto the straight. Lando Norris in the qualifying just before had it. The familiarisation session didn't really work because everyone couldn't really find the right track. So not great overall for that. And really, we're going to be in for a very interesting sprint race where Max can just win the title, 19 laps, where the punctures come in, and we don't know. All that we do know is that yesterday in practice one, when they were doing 23, 25 laps, at the end of the session, everyone was flying off the track because they were losing grip. They thought because of the wind. Now we know it's because of the tyres, the small cuts affecting the air pressure and losing the rear of the car. And we saw that with Norris in qualifying 3 for sprint quali, that he went off the last corner due to a rear snap as well. So it's going to be very interesting to see what we're going to have in the sprint race. And if it is going to be a 3-stop Grand Prix tomorrow, then it's every 20 laps, which means it's the first time I remember that happening in Formula One. It's happened in MotoGP before. At the Australian Grand Prix at Phillip Island in about 2013, everyone had to come in at half distance, change bike. Famously, Marc Marquez did it a lap too late and got black flagged, almost cost him the championship. So if we see that tomorrow, everyone's going to have to follow it, letter of the law. Every 20 laps, come in and away you go. So it's going to be very, very fun.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens. Comment in the chat room. Day in life was at Indy in 2005, and I quit watching F1 for years. And it was something else. If I remember the fans just booing and leaving, and that was a dark day for F1. And still, it just surprised me how F1 has rebounded now here in the United States. Now, hopefully, we don't have a race where every 20 laps everyone's making pit stops, because that will compromise the strategy for everyone. We've seen it happen in Indianapolis, where NASCAR had to throw a caution flag after every 10 laps for everyone to make pit stops. So we do have different tire compounds with the soft, medium, and hard, but nobody's going to be using the hard tires because you're going to be going 20 laps. So Josh, does this make the race harder for everyone in overtaking, especially if they're relying on strategy?
Well, this track was already hard to overtake anyway. We saw it's a MotoGP style track. They've done their best to try and get it up to temperature for Formula One standards. They've added a few extra high grip areas of the track where offline it's a lot more easier to get gripped up compared to a MotoGP track. So it should be a little bit easier to overtake. But with these tyres, especially in the sprint race, I don't think we're going to see a lot of overtaking, which is good news for the two McLarens as Piastri ahead of Norris on pole. It's mainly going to be it's not really going to affect the sprint too much, this tyre issue. It's mainly going to affect the race tomorrow. And in terms of that with strategy, yes, everyone is going to be now thinking, okay, now the opportunity comes that we can have a go at pushing harder in terms of the first 20 laps. It effectively becomes 3 sprint races. 20 laps each, 19 laps today, 20 tomorrow, but it's a 57-lap race. So they're going to have to nurse it towards the end to get it. So we're going to see flat-out racing. And the last time we saw this degradation of the tyres come into play was Canada in 2010. Everyone said that was the best race ever, and it set the precedent for Pirelli to come in a year later with tyres that degraded every so laps, and we had like 4 or 5 pit stops a race. So we could see a great race, but at what cost to Formula One in their image here? They need to make it work in Qatar. They've signed a 10-year contract. The fans are packed in. It's great seeing them. But if they don't get it right and they make mistakes, it will cost them badly.
Yeah, Josh, I totally agree with you here, especially in that the sprint won't see much problems with this issue. However, this could really affect the race tomorrow because not only are the drivers going to be pitting maybe 2, 3 times during the race, but coming out of the pit stops as well, the strategies are all going to have to be really different, and there's going to be a bunch of other issues that are going to come up with this, and it's definitely going to make overtaking hard as well. So I think that we're not going to see many changes from the lineup that we have for the starting lineup, that you just brought up. Um, but I think that it's definitely going to cause other sorts of issues. Overtaking is going to be very hard. I think the drivers are going to be overall more careful in the race. In the sprint, they might try to push their tires as much as they can, to score points. And because the sprint's shorter, so they don't really have to worry much about causing issues with their tires. But in the race, they're definitely going to be more cautious with everything.
And we got a comment in the chat room. Definitely interesting idea. Restart the race 3 times. So rather than having everyone stop, just throw a red flag, have them all grid up. Josh, Isha, what are your thoughts on this creative idea?
I've heard rumors that they're going to throw the safety car to make everybody pit, and the safety car will be commanding the field through the pit lane, so it makes everybody stop. That creates issues because of double stacking. It's not like in NASCAR where everybody has their own box. So that's going to be an issue. I'm hearing that if we do have to do it, it would be virtual safety car conditions, and everybody would have to come through the pit lane. That's a fair option, but it's too much competition yellow, as we've had before. That's embarrassing if we have to do that. I would rather we stay under green and see if anybody pushes it. I'd rather lap 18 to 21, every stint on tyres, you have to come in, like regulate it into stages. That I would rather have, but keep the race green. Don't throw in artificial yellows or virtual safety cars or safety cars, because then we're just going to have restarts upon restarts, more chances for chaos and more chance for drama. We've got 3 minutes 40 left, by the way, on the touring car, so I'll disappear in 1 minute 40 and then be back.
Yeah, no, I agree with Josh here. I think that, restarting the race 3 times or bringing in a safety car, whether that's virtual or in person, it's definitely going to add to the chaos of the race. And going back to the previous question, it's just going to make overtaking and everything else much harder. So I think that, as Josh said, setting regulations where all the teams have to bring their drivers in to pit, I think that's definitely going to be easier. But physically putting a safety car out there or using a virtual safety car or restarting, all of that is just going to add too much chaos to the race. And I think that that could add other problems as well. So I think that, they should try to keep it as simple and easy as possible.
It's going to be really interesting to see. Hopefully, we have a situation where, with the changes, the tires they look better. We have a race where the tires are not an issue at all, and at least the one thing compared to 2005, you had 2 tire compounds, so it's much more resistant to changing the track, changing the scenarios. Because at the end, it's all about racing the points on the line. Here, one sole tire supplier, so everyone's much more on the same page. One of the big things, of course, the sprint race, points are going to be awarded. Max Verstappen looking to make history. First driver to wrap up the championship in a sprint race. 3 points or more. He is the world champion. So 6th place finish or better for him in today's sprint race. And Max Verstappen will be a 3-time Formula One World Drivers' Champion. Qualifying, he looked to be on another level, potentially untouchable again, until he had track limits. So he's going to be starting 3rd. So he's still in a position to wrap up the championship. Isha, do you believe the championship should be rightly decided in a sprint race? Or should it just be not in a sprint race, but in the Grand Prix only?
Joe, I know this is something that we were talking about before the show as well, but um, as far as the question goes, will the championship be decided in the sprint race? That's a definitive yes, obviously, because all Max Verstappen has to do is finish 6th or higher. However, should they be decided in sprint races? I don't think so. I think that part of the fun, even for the drivers, in celebrating it, is at the end of a Grand Prix, when you've done all that hard work, and then at the end of the Grand Prix, you celebrate your championship. And I personally think that the sprint races should be separate from, the driver standings overall. I know this is an idea that you were talking about before the show, but in general, keeping the sprint races separate and then having a separate like driver standings for them, I think is better than combining it with the Grand Prix and then also celebrating championships in the sprint races. I think that they should be separate, and I just find it to be more satisfying that you celebrate the championship at the end of a Grand Prix.
Championship at the end of Grand Prix, and one of the things, have it where it's a separate championship for the sprint, and then maybe whoever's the sprint race champion of the year, 5-10 bonus points into the Drivers' World Championship. So that way, because it is seems odd to be, okay, you're the world champion, be sure to come back tomorrow for the Grand Prix race. Adam in the chat room, F1 Championship should be decided in the Grand Prix, not the sprint race. And especially if for some reason the sprint races disappear, if Formula 1 decides, not worth it, the history books, and Verstappen got it in a sprint race, which we don't do anymore. Compared to the Japanese Grand Prix, wasn't the case this year, but it has such a long history of drivers getting their World Drivers' Championship in their race. I think it adds to the stature. I don't think the sprint race is the best place to do it. For McLaren, though, they have to be thrilled about this sprint race because they're both on the front row, the 2 McLarens. Oscar Piastri, what a drive. From the heartbreak of being interviewed with Naomi Schiff the night before to, you've been dropped. Today, he's on the pole. Both of them, they will have a lot of work in the Grand Prix because of that. But one of the big things we saw, Lando Norris, he's going to be 10th place for the Grand Prix. Oscar, he's going to be down to 6th place. Now, McLarens are fast, no doubt, especially what they showed today. But we know the potential of this tire issue and everyone pitting at the same time. So, Isha, can the two McLaren drivers reach the podium, or do you see the Mercedes teams essentially being a big roadblock and prevent that from happening?
Joe, I think it's going to be almost impossible to see both of the McLaren drivers up in the podium. I think there's a good chance that Oscar could be up there, but the Mercedes drivers will give him a hard time as well. But as far as Lando Norris is concerned, I don't think he's going to make it anywhere near the top, near the podium as well, because the things that we were just talking about with the tire issues, and then having to pit 3 times during the race, all of that is going to make overtaking very hard. And Lando Norris is in 10th place, as you said. So for him to come up to cut in front of Esteban Ocon, Gasly, Bottas, all of them, it's just going to make things difficult. I think that the highest up he can go maybe is like 7th place. But as far as Oscar Piastri is concerned, I think that for him it's going to be easier to get up to maybe 3rd place, or at least to get in front of Fernando Alonso into 4th place. But to see both of them up in the podium, I think that's pretty much impossible for tomorrow's race.
Absolutely. Sorry, I don't know how long there was a delay there before I came on, because I heard Isha still talking. Didn't want to interrupt you. But yeah, I just finished the touring cast. So McLaren coming in, as you said as well, both of you, really difficult result with qualifying yesterday. Piastri not getting in where he wanted. He was second, now down to 6th. Norris starts 10th. Bad day for them, but they've bounced back big time, as Isha mentioned, with the race today. Lando, starting P2, knows he keeps making mistakes, know where he keeps making mistakes, and will try and rectify that. Oscar Piastri has got nothing to lose. Second in the sprint race, remember, the Belgium Grand Prix, could easily take the win here. Max is behind in 3rd. Max is going to be thinking championship. Yes, he wants to win it, but he's got the best option here to move forward. So I'm confident that we are going to see a victory for one of the McLarens in the sprint, whether that be Piastri or Norris. We'll find out. And then I'm confident as well, you said about the championship in the previous question, because I'm hearing as well. I don't agree with the fact that a championship is going to be decided on a Saturday, but it will akin to what his father-in-law effectively did, because Nelson Piquet won all 3 of his championships on a Saturday, because in 87, when Mansell crashed, he wasn't declared unfit to race until the Saturday. Ergo, Piquet won all his titles on a Saturday. He was the last one to do it as well in 1987. And now it looks like his so-called son-in-law, because they're not married yet, is going to do it here as well in Qatar. But no, I said this. Do you remember, guys? I said it on the show before. How long until the sprint race decides the world championship? And everyone's in uproar about it today. And I know you don't script them, but I have thought of something to say for Max Verstappen. And I'll say it if he wins it. His first championship was controversial. His second championship was confusion. His third championship is on a Saturday. He can never win one in the correct way. It is unbelievable. And I do feel sorry for him, because he's dominated this year.
Dominated this year, last year too. I mean, if you look at the time zones, it wasn't Japan, so we know for a lot of folks it was still a Saturday last year.
True.
So it's just one of those deals where, unfortunately for Verstappen, I mean, he's earned all his championships, but it just seems the controversy because of the governing body has overshadowed it. But at the end of the day, I think this is going to be something where we'll be talking about it. But big thing, he earned it. Verstappen, Russell, and Alonso, those are the top 3 starters in the Grand Prix. One of the big things, of course, Alonso, his teammate, failed to get out of Q1. Lance Stroll, we talked about him last week about the patience running out on him to perform. This week, Lance Stroll looks like his patience is starting to run out, as he was showing big time frustration after being eliminated in Q1. He got physical with a teammate. He essentially pulled a Kyle Busch interview. And for those fans that are not familiar, Kyle Busch, go there, single word answer, clearly not happy, doesn't want to be there. That was the best explanation of Lance Stroll's attitude yesterday. And he even used a word where you wouldn't want to say on live air. Isha, Josh, we know in NASCAR, fans love to see raw emotions when drivers are extremely happy or upset. But sometimes this also makes it where, like, you have a case of Denny Hamlin where you just get more boos. Stroll was largely criticized for this behavior. So, Josh, starting with you, is there a space for a driver to pull this kind of behavior, or does it not belong in Formula One?
It doesn't belong in Formula One. I think we've said this numerous times over the past about Lance Stroll and his attitude these days. I've said it actually in practice one before the qualifying session about how he's the most useless driver in Formula One at the moment. I got quite a lot of controversy for that, but if you think about it, he is. Since the summer break at the Dutch Grand Prix onwards, when we came back, he has not scored a single point. In the standings, Alonso is, I believe, let me just have a look, he's on 174 and Stroll's on 47. So he's more ahead in the championship, double it. The mind boggles. It absolutely boggles why Lawrence Stroll continues to keep his son in the car, why Aston Martin, the board, because it's not just owned by Lawrence Stroll now, there's a consortium of them all in there, there's a whole board, why they're not putting pressure on him to kick out his son, because he's just not needed anymore. I think I'm going to have to disappear because it looks like our TV pictures are frozen in the box, so I'll finish my point quickly. Yeah, there's an error. I've got dead. Oh, hang on. Yeah, I've got dead air. Can you come back to me? I've got dead air on my side. I do apologise. Isha, I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, no, Josh, I totally agree with what you said. This kind of behavior it's not appropriate for Formula One. We've seen it happen in NASCAR before, but we know that NASCAR overall is more of a chaotic motorsport series, you could say, compared to Formula One, where Formula One's more like refined, I feel like, and professional. So seeing this behavior from Lance Stroll is really disappointing. And I just don't think that it exists in Formula One. There's no space for it here.
No space for it here. And one of the big things I feel when you look at NASCAR Cup Series, those drivers, short track racing, this is the kind of stuff we see in short tracks in the United States, the fights, the contact. This is American motorsport. This is Formula One, a different crowd, a different attitude. You wouldn't see this most of the time in karts. You wouldn't see this in Formula 2, Formula 3 defeater systems. And at the end of the day, even for fans, just because Kyle Busch does what Kyle Busch does, that does not guarantee that he has fans that love it. There's a lot of fans that hate it too. So for Lance Stroll, this was one of those deals where I think he really put himself in a bad spot. Josh, I got to ask you as a follow-up, though. Let's just say George Russell or Daniel Ricciardo was to have this kind of out Q1, show the frustration, did the Kyle Busch interview. Will we see as much criticism for them, or is it because of Lance Stroll and his unique relation with his father owning the team that he gets criticized more?
I think there would be a level of anger that Russell and him, and they were all having a bad day. They'd be that, oh, they just had a bad day, all that lot. It's not usually like them. I think there is stigma that comes with Stroll being a paid driver, and he's only there because of his dad. And he is only there because of his dad. His dad bought Racing Point to keep his son put his son in that team, and then kept him going, of course. I think there's a stigma around Lance Stroll and paid drivers. I think it's come in especially this year, because in the past I've always been there saying, look, Lance is a fast driver. He's won everything he's come into. He's won everything going up, and he's had multiple podiums in Formula One as well. He's a fast driver. But this year, he has been so off the mark. You've got to start thinking, what did Sebastian Vettel do wrong for the past 2 seasons? It's because Stroll and him were quite level. He's come up against Alonso in a competitive car for the first time in his life. Stroll's had this competitive car in Formula One, and he has fumbled massively. Alonso's taken podiums. He's taken second places on the grid as well. Stroll hasn't even got near that. He's been really poor, not even a podium. And it really does beg the question, what is he doing wrong? He had that double wrist break at the start of the year. He didn't do pre-season testing, but you can't really say that that's the reason why he's been so poor. We're near the end of the season now. We're 17 rounds of 22 this weekend. You would know the car by now. So I don't buy that. He's a timeout driver. Frustrations get into him, and there's pressure from the board, we understand, that the whole reason they're doing the WEC program is to put him in that car and get him out of Formula One and put Drugovich in the seat, which makes sense. But I don't think Stroll's handling it well. And what did you just say with the physical assault on his what we understand is his personal trainer, then there's no place for that in Formula One. There is absolutely no place. That is workplace bullying, and that needs to be dealt with right now. I don't like Lance Stroll. I used to. I thought, oh, he's a cool guy. Now, no. In my opinion, he's a spoiled, immature driver who is only there because of daddy's cash now. He's ran out of excuses in Formula One, and the sooner he gets out, the better. Lawrence Stroll, he can stay. He owns the team. He's part of the consortium with Aston Martin. Even if he leaves, Aston Martin will stay in Formula One because they've got more ownership in than Lawrence. But no, Lance has got to go. And if he doesn't go by the end of the year, I'll be very surprised.
Yeah, Josh. And, I agree with you in that Lance Stroll's got lots of problems going on. And it's not at the point where you can still blame the car and get away with it because we see his teammate, Fernando Alonso, doing an amazing job in that car. So it's really all up to Lance Stroll at this point. And we know that the only reason why he's still on the team is because his dad's in charge. And, if we come back to the question of whether he's getting extra criticism, I think that it's all because of the sort of season that he's had. And then on top of that, he's being abusive towards his teammates as well, and it's teammates who are just trying to help you, like, you're all part of one team. So this sort of behavior doesn't exist in Formula 1, going back to the question before this as well. And if it were Daniel Ricciardo or George Russell in this sort of a position, I think that they would be just as criticized, but I don't see them being in this sort of a position ever because they're drivers who have really proven themselves multiple times over, whereas Lance Stroll really hasn't. And I feel like if it were other drivers at this point, they would have maybe decided on going along with what's better for the team and, quitting themselves or, speaking to management, speaking, in the case of Lance Stroll, he should have a conversation with his dad. And I think that from him, from his dad as well, they need to decide on what's better for the team because, you think that maybe things will get better by the end of the season, but it's been a whole season long problem. And it's not the car, as I've mentioned, as Josh mentioned as well. It's solely the driver and his attitude with the teammates, his attitude on the track. I just think that this whole situation needs to go away, and I think we just need to see a better teammate for Fernando Alonso, one who equally shares the points as well.
And one of the things we talk about how Aston Martin might lose positions in the constructor standing, driver stand, Pierre Gasly, he could overtake Lance Stroll for the top 10. That just, I think, really showing that Lance Stroll has just really been downhill lately. Interesting comment in the chat room. Stroll has not raced well since Mugello when he crashed a pink Mercedes. He was, correct me if I'm wrong, either leading or top 3 position that year in Mugello in the pink racing force.
I think he was running 4th, maybe, off the top of my head. I know he ran 3rd at one stage in the race, but then he had a pit stop, didn't he? Yeah, you're right, yeah.
It just seemed like afterwards, because he has had some mistakes where it's just like Australia, him and Nicholas Latifi crash, and everyone was critical of Lance Stroll. It just seems like maybe similar to what people will say, a big crash like that might shake up their confidence. Interesting to see, and of course, time will tell what's going to happen to Lance Stroll.
Upside down, of course, in Bahrain, he got hit by, was it Kvyat? Who got late after the restart? Yeah, so there was that too, and that must have spooked him because just an hour before Grosjean exploded.
Now, one of the big things, of course, we've been discussing the Grand Prix. Let's switch back to the sprint race. McLaren, the front row today. That has to be a big day for all those fans, and of course the McLaren team, considering where they were earlier this year, where they were way in the back in the first race of the year. Verstappen, he is 3rd, and again, 6th place or better. He has a championship. We've seen where it's very important which side of the grid. If you're on the pole side, usually traditionally the better side, you're going to get a good start. So Lando Norris, he's not going to exactly potentially have that great of a start. He's on the less ideal side. He's just starting with you. If Verstappen wants to have a better start than Oscar Piastri, he's behind, and Lando Norris has not exactly the best start, and the 3 of them are jockeying for position, does Verstappen push it into Turner 1, or is he more likely to concede the position knowing that as long as he's 6th place or better, he's the champion?
Joe, I think that if this were any other driver besides Max Verstappen, they would concede the position. I think so. For the majority of the drivers on the grid, I think that they'd concede the position and just try to stick in the top 6, and I think that they wouldn't push themselves as much in the sprint race and focus more on the Grand Prix. But considering that we're talking about Max Verstappen, and we all know what kind of a driver he is and the domination that he's accustomed to, and we've also seen him not listen to his race strategist on multiple occasions and just to go for what he thinks he should be doing. So I think that he's definitely going to try to push it into turn 1 to gain that position on Lando Norris. Um, because as you mentioned, Norris is in the less helpful side of the track. But I just think that if this were any other driver, they would try to play it safe in that situation. But with Max Verstappen, he's definitely going to push and try to gain that position.
Winner, winner. That's all he has in his mind. We saw in the acclimatization session that he was pushing and went off the track, and he came over the radio saying, I had no grip, went off the track. GP had to come over and say, yeah, but it's not qualifying. It's nothing. Just you could have continued the lap. You didn't have to back off. It's not qualifying. You could have kept going. And he said, oh, well, I didn't feel like it. So this is a driver who is pushing so hard. He's in the best form of his life. He's about to become a 3-time world champion. Only Sebastian Vettel has, and I think one of my fans are actually thinking about it, has won 3 titles back to back. But Vettel is the only one to win. Well, hang on a minute, that's wrong because of Schumacher. The first 3 that's the stat. The first 3 world championships back to back is only him and Vettel. Fangio had one in 52, and then he had one in 54, 55, 56, and 78. Schumacher had 2, then he had another 5 later on in his career. But to win your first 3 back-to-back has only ever been done by Sebastian Vettel, and now it's going to be done by Max Verstappen, both in Red Bulls, both in the dominant areas of themselves. It's something brilliant, and I don't know how Christian Horner and Helmut Marko and all that lot find these talented drivers, but it is astonishing the records that they keep breaking. So Max probably does want to win the race, because if he wants to be world champion, he'd want to win the race because he's done it every single time. I think the only driver I think he is actually the only driver to win all your championships by winning the race in history, which is quite fun because he won Abu Dhabi, he won Japan, and now he could win the sprint today. So that could be a little extra stat to come in. He's just rewriting the record book, and we said the same about Hamilton. So how much can Max do? He's 26 years old. He could go for 9 titles, 10 even. He's here until 2028. There's nothing to stop him.
First driver to win the sprint race and be crowned champion is just not the same as the Grand Prix. It's just not the same. Josh T. Hello, Josh and all. And of course, Josh T. I believe Jessica and Alden will be doing the watch along later tonight.
Adam's with us too.
Adam was with you guys. So tonight and of course tomorrow. With that said, before we get into it, let's pick a winner and look at the table. We have a tie for first place between Alex Kobe. So it's going to be very exciting. And there's still a lot of folks mathematically left. We're getting down to 8 races left in the year. And we have a surprise twist. So before we encourage everyone, comment who you think is going to win the race. Isha, starting with you. Who do you think is going to win the sprint race and then the Grand Prix?
Oh, for the sprint race, I think we're looking at... I know Oscar Piastri's done a great job. He's going to be starting first for the sprint, but I think that Lando Norris is just going to... We know that he has pace. We know that they're both in the same car, but I think that Lando Norris is going to get in front of Oscar Piastri somehow because he's been very disappointed in himself, as we've seen in the interviews for the qualifying and then as well as for the sprint shootout. But I think that Lando Norris is going to get in front for the sprint race, and then for the Grand Prix tomorrow, I think that, this isn't obvious. It's going to be Max Verstappen, isn't it?
I will agree it'll be Max Verstappen tomorrow, and I'll also say it'll be Max Verstappen today just because of the World Championship. But you can't really deny him that. I would love it if Piastri or Norris took the win. I'm hoping that they do, but for sake of pick a winner points, it's Max Verstappen who will do both. He'll certainly win tomorrow, and I think he's got a very good chance today. But as Joe and you both said, starts on the dirty side of the grid. So that could be very interesting. And the Red Bulls don't like to get their clutches away as well. They have a little bit of drag. So McLaren's every single time have had a better start. Think back to Japan, Piastri and Norris around the outside, Max instead ahead because the corner sort of pincered. So with them ahead, I think it'll be Verstappen having to pass during the race, not at the start.
In the chat room, Josh T, he and Ed are tied. Ed, longtime leader. I'm going to pick some McLaren drama, sadly. And, oh, man.
They
That's
just
gonna,
finished touring cars.
so, for me, sprint race, I'm going to go Oscar Piastri's going to shock everyone. Grand Prix, Verstappen. I mean, he's on the pole. So this is where the twist comes in. Thanks to Alex Anderson from the Gay Racing Podcast. For Formula One for the rest of the season, for the Grand Prix only, pick 7th place. It's going to be a separate scoreboard. We're not going to combine the sprint F1 sprint Grand Prix versions of pick a winner together, but a separate one. 7 points if you're correct, but if multiple people get it, then the points are split. So it's going to be really interesting to see strategy. Do you want to all go for the same driver or a different driver? So in the chat room, comment, who do you think is going to finish 7th place in the Grand Prix? Isha, starting with you, who do you think is going to finish 7th place?
This is definitely the more interesting pick a winner question because we actually get to think about who's going to win now. Um, I think that, we know that Lando Norris is going to be starting in 10th, but the drivers in front of him are Bottas, Ocon, and Gasly. So I think that with the car that Lando's in, I think that he's going to cut in front and at least get to that 7th place. So that's what I'm going to say for my 7th place pick a winner.
Same mathematically, but Sainz starts 12th and might just get it because I don't think looking at it, it's quite difficult. So I'll go Sainz to finish 7th. But it's hard to look at the two Alpines, isn't it, with Gasly and Ocon? They could play a factor. I'll go Sainz to finish 7th on pure basis that he's the last one that could make up positions that overtaking.
I think I'm going to go with, originally I was thinking George Russell, but he's way up there. I don't think he's going to have that much bad luck. If he has bad luck, he probably will DNF. I might go with Ocon for 7th place. I'm going to go with Ocon. That seems to be something, assuming he doesn't have dozens of penalties, which he has done before, or bad luck or mechanical failure. I think he is my 7th place pick. When it comes to 7th place, Ami is going with Perez. So that's an interesting one.
What about Perez?
Look at what Josh T said. Max will DNF in the sprint. If that happens, then we don't have a championship claimed yet. I'll go to the Grand Prix. Adam Leonard for pick a winner. F1 sprint Piastri. Max Verstappen, Bathurst 1000. Brock Freeney for the Bathurst 1000 next. Chase Elliott, 7th in Qatar, Ocon. So a lot of points on the line. Interesting. If you two get 7th place, you'll get the full 7 points. But me and Adam, we'll have to split it. We'll figure out the tiebreaker for that remainder point. And we encourage everyone to comment in the chat room. As always, we'll be going to Supercars shortly. But Josh, I want to give a big thank you to you for stopping by. Encourage everyone, click on the link in the video description to his channel. Watch along as well. And of course, Isha as well. Isha, Bathurst 1000. That's going to impact whoever's watching that race in Australia's sleep schedule. I know Cody and I are going to be up and going to need a lot of coffee tonight.
Yeah, Joe, it's going to be affecting lots of people, and it's going to be a good time to be Dunkin' Donuts because you're going to be selling to a lot of people as well. Now, shifting gears, as you said, to supercars, we've got the Repco Supercars Series, biggest race of the year. The Bathurst 1000 is here. Now, Brodie Kostecki took the pole ahead of Brock Freeney. They were in the front row. And Shane van Gisbergen is in 6th place. And Joe, this is going to be a long race. Last year, we saw chaos in just the first few laps. So do you anticipate another chaotic start to the race this year?
I don't anticipate a chaotic start like what we saw last year. The weather looks a lot better. I think from the drivers, especially with this new car, you're going to first just want to let's complete the first few laps. This is a long race. You're not going to win the race on the first lap, but you could definitely lose the race on the first lap if you screw up, make a foolish move. So I don't think we're going to see any of the chaos on the first lap. I think the chaos will start to occur more as the drivers start racing each other and getting more comfortable with the car, start pushing the limit, because we got a brand new car this year, with this generation car at Bathurst. This is going to test the cars like they haven't been tested all year long. This is where we could see potential mechanical failure, drivers driving in a little too deep, especially after that long stretch as they're coming down the hill. It's going to be something where I think this race is going to be a little bit more calmer. However, the end of the race, as we saw a couple years ago, Isha, it was going to be look like caution free, everything, and then we had a animal. I don't even remember how to pronounce it anymore. That looked like a porcupine, something only in Australia. Bring out the safety car. Thankfully, they safely removed the animal from the track. And then after that, it turned into a NASCAR style race with caution after caution after caution and the chaos. I think the end of the race, if we have a late caution, that is where we're going to see some of the chaos.
That's right, Joe. You can predict whether it's going to be chaotic or not, if it's going to be calm, but at the end of the day, things can change in the matter of seconds, especially when we're talking about all of these motorsports. But, looking now at Shane Van Gisbergen, who is competing in his last Bathurst 1000 as a full-time driver, he will be leaving for NASCAR in 2024, and he has won this race. So, Joe, is he the real favorite or the ceremonial favorite for this race?
I say he's one of the real favorites. When I'm looking at the favorites for this race, I'm looking at Shane Van Gisbergen, Brodie Kostecki, his teammate Will Brown, and of course Brock Feeney. Dick Johnson Racing, I think they have potential, but they have to run a good, smooth race and potentially have the Chevrolet teams have bad luck. We know the Fords are not exactly there like they want to be. I see a race where for Shane Van Gisbergen, if he just goes out there, runs his own race, he knows how to win this track. I don't see him making a mistake compared to Brodie Kostecki. He still wants to go out there, get this win. Doesn't have the experience level as Shane Van Gisbergen can make the mistake. Brodie Kostecki, Will Brown, this is their best shot at winning this race. They could easily get caught up, especially if for some reason they fall behind and they're trying to make up ground and make a mistake. I think Shane Van Gisbergen, ceremonial favorite, but also the real favorite because he has the experience to go out there, get the win, and less likely to make a mistake the other drivers might be looking at doing.
That's right, Joe. And I believe we've got some comments in the chat room as well. So let's look at those. Adam says, I'll be awake for the Bathurst 1000. And Josh says, I figured that, Adam. Yeah. And, I think that it's just going to be, it's going to be hard because it is in Australia and, the time zone difference is just going to be complicated. But if you love the sport, you're going to be up watching it like we did for Formula One when it was in Japan. But, now, taking a look at another driver, Brock Feeney, his teammate has Jamie Whincup as his co-driver. Now, all the teams have co-drivers to switch off during the driver duties, but does Whincup make Feeney one of the drivers to beat? Joe, what do you think?
It does. Even if he didn't have Jamie Whincup, he had another driver, I think Brock Feeney will still be a driver to look for as one of the favorites. But having Whincup there, you now have that extra boost of confidence that you have one of the best ever in supercar racing there with you in the garage. He could be looking at your telemetry, seeing what you're doing on the track, giving you insightful information. And then he goes in there. You're now watching one of the best at Mount Panorama do what he does best. This is a great opportunity for Brock Feeney to have a great chance of winning this race, getting some good, valuable lessons learned from Jamie Whincup throughout the weekend. Because, like we've always said, you try to enter each race like they're the same one. But this is the Bathurst 1000, Australia's biggest race. You have more distractions going on, more fan attention. So I really think it's going to be one of those deals where this is a big boost of confidence for Brock Feeney. I will not be surprised if he wins this race. And I think him, Jamie Whincup, they have great potential to get this win. And overall, what a smart move by AAA Racing to put those two together.
That's right, Joe. And now this is the end of our segment for this section. But before we wrap it up, it's time for pick a winner. So, Joe, who do you pick for this race?
For this race, it's hard to ignore Brock Feeney, Jamie Whincup. That's very much, I think, one of the new favorites now with that pairing. But I think I'm going to go with Shane Van Gisbergen. I anticipate Brock Feeney might make a mistake somewhere. That is just my thought. This is such a long race. A lot of time for making a mistake to occur. I think that's what's going to be the downfall of him. If he doesn't make a mistake, you still got to face Shane Van Gisbergen. He's going to be hungry. He wants to win his last potentially last Bathurst 1000. I don't anticipate this is going to be his last ever. He might come here on a part-time basis, depending on what happens with NASCAR, but Shane Van Gisbergen, he is my pick. Feels weird to say picking Shane Van Gisbergen, considering for the longest time, he used to be a driver we just pick like Max Verstappen. We should have done pick 7th place last year for the supercars. Shane Van Gisbergen is my pick. And with that said, we are all out of time. We want to thank everyone for tuning in to Grid Life Pre-Race. Be sure to subscribe, like, and comment. That helps us grow. We're already at 750 subscribers, getting closer to 800, and our ultimate goal, 1,000 subscribers. So be sure to share us with your friends and family that love motorsports. We're all over social media. You can visit gridranking.com to see our full social media presence. And big thank you to Colin the Show, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew for investing in the Grid Network each and every month, and everyone that has Bug Cup of Coffee or the YouTube Super Chat, especially for all our team members here at the Grid Network. One final comment in the chat room. Nofer acted on the safety car 2 SC1 times in F1. So looks like everything is all set for the sprint race starting in about 1 hour from now. For Joshua Birch and Isha Azim from Racing with Isha, I'm Joe San Diego. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time and enjoy the races. Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.